we welcome to studio Boaz Bismuth, member of the Israeli Parliament in the Likud party. Boaz, thank you so much for being here, and I'm so glad you just heard that report from my colleague Balia Sladin talking about normalization, talking about what it could mean for Israel and what might be stopping it. Tell us more.
So, first of all, thank you for inviting me. But when I'm sitting here and watching and following the news, I have the impression that, that's what I hear, that deal concerning releasing our hostages, well, Israel is against. Normalization with Saudi Arabia, again, Israel is against. It's absurd, it's ridiculous. Let me tell you something about normalization with Saudi Arabia. On the contrary, I imagine, or I think, or I believe, and this is also logics and in pure common sense, that it's exactly the opposite of what media is telling us right now. You know, about 10 days ago, or 2 weeks, I think it was, Thomas Friedman, you know, he's a known journalist in a very known newspaper called the New York Times. I mean, you have to pay in order to get it. It's kind of important. And the New York Times, he wrote there that you will not have a normalization if you don't have a ceasefire. The opposite. I mean, you know perfectly well that the Abraham Accord on 2020, mid-September 2020, well, because Israel is strong. Don't you think that Saudi Arabia wants to see Hamas maintaining power, Islamic Brotherhood? It's exactly the opposite. The Saudis want Israel to win the war. Yet, I mean, there is, and I'm saying it in a very, how would I say, I restrict myself by saying more things, but they can't be blunt about it, and I think that our friends in Europe and also the Americans know it perfectly well. Then it's exactly the contrary that what you hear in the news. This is A. Second thing concerning, allow me to speak about the hostages, I must say one thing. Israel had 4 initiatives. It's December, January, February, and April. We had our own initiative. Unfortunately, and by the way, we saw the images again, it's heartbreaking. I am the head of the lobby for the hostages at the Israeli Parliament, so I'm in contact, permanent contact with the families of the hostages, and this is something that is heartbreaking. And believe me, I am someone who thinks that Israel has to go stronger. We have to let our army be much more, how would I say, a stronger line in Rafah, be much more harsh. Yet, in order to bring back hostages, I didn't say all the hostages, I want them all back. But in order to bring back hostages, a pause will be not only needed, but will be accepted by, I believe, all of us at the coalition. This is obvious.
Before we get to the day after plan, or potentially the lack of day after plan, which I do want to speak about, I want to know what you say to the families of the hostages. We get to speak to many of them here in studio, and they're waiting for answers. Now, obviously, it's complicated, and obviously it isn't a united voice about the next plan of action to get them home. But 228 days in captivity, and nowhere near closer to getting that ceasefire deal, nowhere near the military operation that is securing hostages. So what do you say to the families when you meet them?
First of all, it's not a question of more than 200 days or 228 days. 1 hour in captivity in Gaza is too much. 1 hour. 1 hour. So this is, I mean, this is insane, this is unbearable, this is unacceptable, and we have the obligation to bring them back. By the way, this is one of the objectives of this war, is of course to destroy Hamas or dismantle Hamas from Gaza, but to bring back our hostages. And I said it to English media, French media, any media you can think of that interviewed me. Without bringing back our hostages, we are not going to win the war. That this is obvious and this is clear. Yet, when we had a chance, when Hamas was serious about the deal, don't forget, a few months ago, you had under the 12 that came back. It means that Israel was serious about the deal. Unfortunately, Hamas right now, for their own reasons, which I can understand, and you can also imagine, do not want a deal. As I said before, and I say it again, Israel had its initiative. There was not one proposition that came from the mediators that Israel said no. I repeat again, there was not one proposition that came from the mediators that Israel did not say yes. And the proposition 2 weeks ago, as if Hamas is ready or said yes for a deal, it was something that was not even on the table. What Hamas wants is the end of the war. What Hamas wants is to maintain its power in Gaza. And this is something that Israel cannot accept, because if Hamas stays in Gaza, as you perfectly know, the Middle East is not a neighborhood where most of the countries love us. I mean, you don't have only good guys in the Middle East. We're also at war against Hezbollah in the north, against Iran, as you know, Houthi, Iraqi Shiite militias in Iraq, and of course Islamic Jihad. So if you do not win this war, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we can pack our bags and say goodbye to our Zionist dream.
What is the plan for the day after?
Very good question. The day after. I mean, I'll answer you because this is also has become like this main question in panels. I mean, about as if we don't have a plan for the day after, and therefore, I mean, this is a not only disgrace. I mean, this is a total failure. So let's talk about the plan. First of all, the plan is Gaza the day after, no Hamas. This is number one. When I hear of a technocrat government where Hamas might maintain itself, unacceptable. This will not happen. The day after, let's talk about the day after. Do you think that any regime, any Islamic or Arab country that will that will speak openly about cooperating with Israel about the day after, do you think that they will maintain in power? Of course not. You cannot speak. Let's talk about those groups, those important, what we call Hamula in Hebrew or in Arabic, those groups inside Gaza that can replace Hamas. 14th of March, for example, one of the leaders of those groups was assassinated. Why? Because because Israel, by the way, declared, though it was open, that we are cooperating with them. Third possibility, Palestinians from the Palestinian Authority, gunmen, if you want, following the convoys in Gaza. It took only one day. Why? Because Hamas did not allow them to work over there. Meaning, as long as Hamas is there, it's very difficult to speak openly or to point in your finger which country will help you or which group will do so. When Hamas will be out of Gaza or will not be ruling in Gaza anymore, then you will be able to speak of the day after. And another thing, to all those countries in the world that tell me, or all those, how would I say, all those experts that tells me, no, it has to work, etc. Before being a member of parliament, I used to be a journalist myself. I covered Iraq War number 1, Iraq number 2, Kosovo, Afghanistan. I have Libya, civil war. Libya, I totally forgot. Let's speak, all of us. Libya, the day after. Iraq, the day after. Afghanistan, the day after. What a success story. Why? Because Taliban stayed, because those tribes in Libya stayed, and Iraq, all those militias. And therefore, one must understand, you clean Gaza from all those horrific elements, which are terrorist groups, and then, believe me, you will have a day after.
Is the US happy with that answer? Does it not want a more concrete plan?
Look, the United States, which are our best friends, I mean, many times they did not like our answers. They didn't like, what was the name of the first American ambassador, James McDonald, didn't like the answer he got from Ben-Gurion, yet Ben-Gurion maintained his position. Johnson didn't like the answer from Levi Eshkol, and he maintained his answer. The same with Begin when he called Samuel Lewis, and Samuel Lewis didn't like the answer, neither President Reagan, and Israel maintained its answer, and we stayed best friends.
Eitan Dangot.
I may say that I'm not agree with my friend. I think a day after is not mathematics, it's a way of a process. And a way of a process that according to the government goals, the IDF succeed to achieve some of these goals in order to give the opportunity to start like kind of experiment and studying from this issue. For example, the north part of Gaza was in our hands for 4 months, and the government has not even sit, the war cabinet and the other cabinet, let's call it, didn't have any kind of discussions what to try to do. The other partners, I don't know whom Boaz would like to bring here, someone from the moon, someone from the sun, to be instead of the Palestinians. With who is going to live? The Palestinians. So you cannot make obligation or that the only way to achieve it is that the area will be empty from Hamas. We cannot achieve it in a limit time. This is till now we are fighting in the West Bank. Even there is their agreement on stabilization. You cannot compare it. But in order to create something, everybody is observed and see it. And I think we made them to withdraw from being involvement in these circumstances. What we can do, we have to make ourselves kind in this junction to decide. Boaz is right. 1 hour to be hostages is terrible. So now, instead of looking, I think they need to take decisions while we are strong. What does it mean? First of all, if you want to release the hostages, stop it now. Yes, release whom you have to release and renew it on the other part. And I cannot also tell you how immediately to renew the fight with Hamas is coming 12 years, this government by Bibi Netanyahu give cash money to Hamas to build its force. So what we expect that IDF will solve it in 6 months. We need time, we need patience, we have to look to the north when we are going to bring back the north, or we need a pause in order to organize our strategic targets and to start with releasing of the hostages. Yes, in these circumstances, in order to bring something much more better to our future in this kind of leadership that we have here.
I think we risk potentially overthinking. And Boaz, you have the eloquence of a former journalist. I think you made the most of the government's position. It cannot be put any better, and it's very impressive, but I think you're wrong. The truth, basically, is not that Hamas prevents a discussion the day after, but two people who Netanyahu fears more than Hamas, I think, are preventing it, and that is Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Because for the day after is really, really simple. It's going to have to be some version of the Palestinian Authority. That's just all there is to it. There is nothing else, not a man from the moon and not a woman from Mars. Okay, that's what it will be, and this government can't say those words. Moreover, if you talk to U.S. officials, they will tell you MBS in Saudi Arabia has reduced the price for normalization with Israel to almost nothing. It's the Americans who are asking them to ask for something for the Palestinians in order to have it look like a reasonable edifice. Saudi Arabia wants this normalization, and they want it now because they want the defense pact, and they fear that if Trump comes back to power, the Democrats in the Senate will block it. So basically, Netanyahu and this government, because they can't give lip service to a Palestinian state, and they can't even say, yes, the PA will be restored in Gaza, is preventing a peace deal with Saudi Arabia.
Boaz, I get you to have the parting words.
Thank God we found the responsible for all the diseases and dysfunction in the Middle East, which is Benjamin Netanyahu, but we're used to it. Let's answer.
This is coming from the U.S. administration, by the way.
May I answer?
The answer
Did not disturb.
Benjamin Netanyahu
I'm waiting.
will be a leader.
Tell me when I can answer
we need a
without
unity
it being
government,
disturbed.
without those extremists that are preventing any kind, that are represent the majority in these countries, leading by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Okay, Boaz, you get the final word. Your response.
Did you finish, both of you? Can I answer? Thank you so much. So first of all, concerning the fact about the money being given 14 years, I will not now here in this panel have a debate about who's responsible and what has exactly happened, but I do remember, and you remember as well, that we had another government after Netanyahu. His name was Mr. Bennett, and you had also Yair Lapid.
For 1 year.
I didn't say for 1 year, but I didn't say them stopping giving money. Another thing, and please, you're disturbing me right now. And second thing, humanitarian aid, the same thing we're being told about humanitarian aid right now. Humanitarian aid, we were also told before. I remember I was editor-in-chief, I was speaking to the head of the army, and I remember how much humanitarian aid was important. The only problem is that Hamas, with the money they got, look what they did. They told us elections in Gaza. We said, okay, for elections, and look what has happened and who won the elections. So we listened so much for experts for many, many years. Allow us this time to listen to logic, to common sense, and to the Israeli people. And then I come to you. When you say about Netanyahu and about the Palestinian Authority, you mentioned that we're not from the moon or something. Honestly, I have the impression that you're not in Israel right now. I don't know in which satellite or which space you are, and I'll explain to you why. You cannot find any Israeli that right now that will accept the Palestinian Authority to go into Gaza, and I'll tell you why. You mentioned before Jenin or the Palestinian Authority right now. What is happening over there? Aren't we going inside Jenin in order to clean it from terrorists? Can we trust them? Do you want me to talk about a survey that you had at the Palestinian Authority from Fatri Shkaki? 73% of them support 7th of October, although the consequences. Do you believe that after the 7th of October, I will trust them? You can trust them. I don't. And for the time being, I do think that what I say is much closer to the Israeli population than what you say. You speak as experts. We listen to experts for so many years. We saw exactly where we arrived.
Boaz, there's another point of view. And if you talk to the Israeli security establishment...
Yeah, but it can be wrong, by the way.
The Israeli security establishment will probably tell you that the PA in the West Bank, for all the difficulties and all the imperfections, fundamentally is playing a positive role.
I listen to you, but I do know that after the 7th of October, I am now taking zero risks.
You're going to be left with a military occupation.
I will take I do not want to occupy. What I said before, the day after, when Hamas will not be there, believe me, you will find many that will want, on the contrary, to be there in rebuilding Gaza.
That's a fabulous,
right now, I think that you live.
Notion.
No, I think that right now you live in a certain dream. And I gave you an example. You spoke about America. So if you ask about American administration or the American plans, tell me.
Gentlemen.
Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, is it a success story the day after? Answer me.
Well, I do agree with you that Hamas needs to be eradicated from Gaza. On that point, we can agree.
I'm talking
That
concretely
final
examples.
Point. We
Just
are going
one
to have to lead it
sentence.
there. You've got 10 seconds,
10
Eitan.
seconds. The main goal of Israel is Iran, the main threat to our existence. And we have to think about this kind of strategic situation around us and not to make a war everywhere, because the only way is power. The day after will come. When it comes.
Hamas in Gaza. Because we have
When it
Iran, we leave
comes-
Hamas in
No
Gaza.
one is saying
That's what
that.
you say. That's
No
your,
No
that's your
one
logic.
said it.
That's
No
what
one
you said
said
right
it.
now.
We
Boaz
control
Bismuth,
probably I'll
Dan
have to-
Perry,
I'll have
Eitan
to-
Dangot, thank you so much. Clearly, this conversation is definitely going to continue. We appreciate your insights. We appreciate your... Definitely, we appreciate your passion. It is important. Thank you so much for being here in studio.